Okay, this morning clearly is on the Museum of Scottish Railways. Many of you have heard of the SRPS, the Scottish Railway Preservation Society. In governance terms, it's actually part of the Museum of Scottish Railways. But we think of the Museum of Scottish Railways as two buildings at the far side of the yard in Bo'ness. Those of us who are aware of its existence at all. But the Museum of Scottish Railways comprises several different parts. What most people see, of course, is the working railway, and that's the thing that excites youngsters and arguably excites oldsters like many of ourselves. Trains from Bo'ness to Manuel running during the period April to October, except in 2020 when they haven't run at all. We were forced to close down completely, and because of the nature of our own operation, we actually closed down the entire yard, and people like myself were banned from even coming onto the premises without very special permission. That enabled me to go on and empty all the dehumidifiers that we use. Probably many of you will realize that in a museum we've got to keep it as dry as possible, and in certainly our most precious areas we have dehumidifiers, and there were about 16 of them had to be switched off and just left over the summer because there was no way of emptying them or servicing them. So that has been and is a concern for us right now. So no trains this summer, no access to anything until about 3 weeks ago, and in the same period, the director of the museum part of the railway operation moved on to another job, and the assistant curator moved on to another job, which leaves me as volunteer to run the museum and to reopen it. I now have a small team and we're trying to reopen it as we speak. I may come back to that a little bit later. I'm certainly happy to answer questions on the implications. Society itself was established in 1961, as I think you've perhaps heard. John, I think it was you perhaps who made some reference to it at that point in time. That was the point of, among the years of the Beeching evolution or revolution, when we were starting to move from steam locomotives, there's one picture there, not one that we've got, I'm afraid, to diesel locomotives, diesel multiple units. You see one on the bottom right. That diesel multiple unit, or one of that class, we actually have in our museum. In 1979, the decision was made to move. We had started off with a yard near Grahamston Station, I believe. I never saw it. I never had any part of the railway in the 1960s, early 70s, indeed until 2000. But in 1979, the move was made to its present home, which was the rail yard, basically, of the Bo'ness docks. It had been used to store locomotives to be scrapped, I believe. I have a vague memory of coming through to Bo'ness from Glasgow, where I lived in the 60s, and looking at all the scrapped locomotives lined up in Bo'ness, taking the numbers and assiduously putting them into my little book that I used to maintain. So that was my interest in railways at that time. We moved into Bo'ness, the railway moved into Bo'ness 1979, and with quite a bit of help from Falkirk Council, what would have been called then, somebody else might know, I couldn't within me come up with that, but the council helped build the railway, but most of the work was done by the many hundreds of volunteers that are the basis of the Bo'ness and Canel Railway. Now there's another term. The railway is referred to as the Bo'ness and Canel Railway, which is operated by the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, which is part of the Museum of Scottish Railways. The station at Bo'ness came from Wormit. Wormit is still at the south end of the new Tay Bridge, remembering that the old Tay Bridge was damaged and collapsed in a storm. The new Tay Bridge came onto the Fife side at Werbit, and I think that station goes back to the 1840s, well, it will be 40s, it'll be 60s, 70s, 80s maybe, 1880s. We got it, it was reassembled, and is our main station. The shed you can see just slightly to the right of it is part of the old Haymarket station, which goes back to the 1840s. 1842, we think, was when that was originally erected. It was taken down and reassembled at Bo'ness. Signal box came from the Muckland and Kirkintilloch Railway. Those of you who know the site will know exactly where it is. It's just at the west end of the station complex, next to the bridge. Right now that bridge is closed because it got rusty and had to be taken away and repaired. Where the three people are standing on the bridge is a hole at the moment, and it's a hole that I desperately need filled so that that can be reopened to get to the museum. I can't reopen my museum until that bridge is repaired, is completed. Hopefully, once they determine in reassembling it, there's minor problems and it's alignment problems, and that therefore is causing a delay, and assembling enough volunteers prepared to work with each other in the current COVID situation is obviously a problem. Burke Hill Station came from Moneyfeith in Angus, from the railway line that is particularly noted after yesterday's tragedy. But Burke Hill Station from there, it has been used as a film set in many occasions. It's quite a lucrative source of income for us because we are used quite regularly as a railway in films, and we've had every aspect you can possibly imagine of period dressing and all the rest of it. And even on one occasion, we were all banned from coming to the railway on a particular winter's Sunday because a number of young ladies were required to strip off and run about the railway and the platforms. So the members were told that they couldn't turn up in these days. But it's amazing the amount of activity there is by external people coming in and making films. And there are several films that if you watched, you'd be surprised to see Burke Hill Station in the background, or indeed people coming out of platforms. They're quite good at disguising it, but nevertheless, those of us who know it well recognise what's going on. 1987, the track was extended out to Canel, and we have a Canel Station. No buildings at Canel, but we have a platform, and the trains stop there briefly on virtually all their runs. 1989, we reached to Burke Hill, which I mentioned a moment ago. We used to alight there for clay mine, it says. The Burke Hill clay mine was open to visitors until about, I was going to say 3 or 4 years ago. That probably means it's about 7 or 8 years. You know what it's like when you get to my age. You think a couple of years ago is the reality, and in fact it's much further back. But the clay mine was closed to visitors completely because it was unsafe and required work done, and it could not be funded. So we offered it to the railway. The clay mine was not ours, it was Falkirk Council's. They offered it to us on the basis that we might want to maintain it. I was on the board at the time, and we had a long debate, as boards do and things like that, and finally decided that within our articles of association, within our objectives, running the clay mine, repairing it and manning it and all the rest of it was not part of the railway's job. That wasn't what we were there to do. So it's closed, and it's one less visitor attraction. There is significant work going on out there at the moment, though. We built on the right-hand side, which you can just see the beginning of the second track, the extreme right of the picture. There is a new platform there, and there's a new bridge just been built last year across the railway. So we hope to promote Burke Hill as a place to get off. There's sincere intentions to build a World War II exhibition, permanent exhibition, on the other side to the right there of what you can see, and that will be an attraction. And we foresee trains passing there. At the moment, we have a single track up to Manual. Trains reverse and come back down it again. So when one train is on the track, it has possession of the entire line from Bo'ness Station upwards. So there will be a signal box at the end of the main platform that you can see here, just before that bridge. Again, that's the plan, and that will enable trains to pass, so that there will be two sections, one section up to Burke Hill and another section, Burke Hill to Manual. That will make it possible for people to get off the train, have a walk, go round what was the clay mine site, or the area around it, look down into the Avon Gorge there, and walk around in other ways, and then perhaps pick the next train up back, or carry on up to Manual. All these things are in the plans, would have been well advanced this year had it not been for COVID-19. I suspect next winter much will happen. Just down that track where you see it, we had our own landslide, I believe, 2 nights ago, and our track is currently closed. I have no idea what the extent of it is. I don't know whether it's just earth over the top of it, or whether the track itself is damaged. But these things are a reality in any railway, and just as much a reality in a railway like the Bo'ness and Canel Railway. 1995, the first shed of the Scottish Railway Exhibition, SRE we called it, was opened up. It's the northern of the two buildings that form the main part of the existing museum, and quite a few vehicles were housed in there, as you can see there. The display hall was extended by building a second one in 2004, and this is the building into which you enter at present. Some of you may recognise the red locomotive on the left, Midland Railways 1000, that was on loan to us for a while from the National Railway Museum in York. We have another vehicle in there at the moment, and its name is escaping me for an instant. But anyway, we have a black large vehicle that's owned by a gentleman in Fife, which we are storing the Marquis, Grand Marquis, is in there at the moment, and she's a beautiful locomotive as well. Well, if you think locomotives are beautiful. So this display hall has been extended. We have extended it further since 2004, and indeed, where you see the red and white, red and cream coach over there now, there is a Glasgow subway coach in that position at the moment. And just at the end of that coach, we are just about to start building a new entranceway, a much larger entranceway with heating, which is very important to our volunteers, because there's no heating at the moment in the reception area. We will have coffee capability for customers, and people will enter. I would be pointing to you right now if I could, but it's basically on the right corner of that screen. So that's work for this winter. That's part of a huge project to build a new steam shed. This is a £3.5–4 million project. It's significantly funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund and other funders, including a large amount of money from ourselves and a large contribution in resource. That will enable us to have a permanent apprentice manager, and we will have up to 5 or 6 apprentices working in that hall, and they will learn the tricks of the trade in maintaining steam locomotives. So that's planned to be complete by the end of the next year. It'll be well underway this year. The space is cleared for it, and it would have been started by now. But we've now got the go-ahead to proceed despite COVID, and I would expect at the start of next season I'll have my entrance to the museum and a degree of comfort for the staff, and the steam shed will be under construction. There'll be a new entranceway, a new way of getting to the museum, and that will be going past the side of the steam shed, and there'll be a way to look into the steam shed. Any of you who have been interested enough to go to York will remember that you can see into their workshops in York through a raised viewing platform. We will do exactly the same in Bo'ness, and the pathway there will be a level pathway avoiding the bridge from the station to this new entranceway. So progress all the time. 2010, I've talked about manual. That was when we extended across the Avon to manual. That was significant. We have put at manual a single platform with what we call a passing loop. That's right next to the main Glasgow-Edinburgh railway line. And at that point, we were able to also have a link from our railway onto the main line, recognised and obviously managed by Network Rail. So we can take any vehicle that is allowed to run on mainline tracks, we can take that off our line onto the main line without having to put it on a road vehicle, which is what we had to do before. Everything at the railway is dependent on volunteers. This lot were clearing trees from the side of the line. If you know it, you realise that there's incursion from trees and vegetation in all parts of the line, and therefore it's got to be kept clear. Just one of the jobs that has to be done. I keep myself to the museum itself, whereas there are many people who do all sorts of things, from painting stuff, from restoring insides of vehicles. There are people who sew things. A museum has a lot more to it than you would imagine. Just gone the wrong way. We are an accredited museum. I cannot recall precisely when we were first accredited, but it was certainly 2000s, possibly 1999, but I think very early 2000s. That basically means that we have the right to receive funding because we have convinced people that we have a structure that is up to an appropriate standard. We are a 4-star, we'd love to be a 5-star, but 4 stars Scottish tourist attraction. And we are a member of a Museum Gallery Scotland. And we get significant support and grants from all sorts of organisations as a result of that accreditation. The exhibition halls house a broad range of locomotives, wagons, coaches, other exhibits. Yes, we've got loads of vehicles. Those of you who've been in recently will recognise the ones that are in the pictures. We have essentially, the main hall is about passenger railways. The second hall, which is the original hall, is about goods railways. And a big attraction, especially for children, in the second hall is that we have a travelling post office where the children can go in and sort letters and put them in tickets, as they used to do on the trains going typically from Glasgow or Edinburgh to London every night, carrying the post in those directions. The other thing is, you can see just on the left-hand picture, the CR thing on the right-hand side, there's an interpretation board. We do actually, and this is a personal opinion because the work was all done before I was ever there, but we do actually, I believe, tell the story of the impact the railways had on Scotland quite well. If you read these interpretation boards going around the museum, there's a lot more to it than you'd expect. You know, starting back from the position, I'm not going to tell the story of the Scottish Railways, of course, but But starting back from the point when the railways arrived in Scotland, and prior to that, people had no real means other than getting on horseback of getting from one point to another. So people stayed pretty much in their own immediate area. The railways completely revolutionised that, and therefore changed the entire background to Scotland, changed the culture almost, one could argue. So the railways are extremely important. Lost the word. We do a huge amount of restoration work, as I think you probably will know. These Caledonian Railway coaches are basically too large to have on display in our displayable areas, but they're held in another shed, which unfortunately is not open to the public because it's a working shed. But these are beautiful coaches. They come out from time to time. They came to us in a parlous state, and they have been restored inside and out into immaculate condition, and they're wonderful to see. If you ever get an invitation to get in one of these coaches, I commend it to you, unless you're not interested in railways at all. On display in the museum from the Highland Railway, there's a timetable, a poster. We have huge numbers of posters and various other things that we'll talk about. I find it very interesting to look at the timings. It says from 1st July. I don't think there's a date on that one. Interestingly, the old posters tended not to have dates, which gives us a problem in working out just exactly what they are. But I'm pretty sure that would be late 19th century. And certainly the timetable there is consistent with the timetables we've got it's in the backup in what we call the archive store, where the archive is maintained. Newly on display, this part of, we can't keep the whole of every locomotive, but people tended to squirrel away bits and pieces as locomotives were scrapped in the 1960s, and now in the early 2000s, bits and pieces from all sorts of places that were quite probably not acquired legitimately are finding their way out of people's attics to our museum as a generation passes on. So the museum and its management involves accessioning, as we call it, large numbers of new artifacts. By new, I mean new to us. They've been held as parts of people's collections, and without wanting to be sexist, typically widows are trying to find somewhere to put them rather than keep them after their late husband has passed away, the late husband being the collector. So very much an active aspect of the museum's work at the moment. Our photograph collection, my own particular baby, I suppose. I started working on the photograph collection in 2007-8, and we now have 32,000 photographs in the collection. They are all identified. They are all, virtually all, scanned. So if someone wanted this picture that's in front of you here, I have a scan of it, and I can print off a copy for people, which we sell for a small amount of money, really just covering our costs. But nevertheless, there's almost anything that you can imagine wanting to know about railways in photographic terms, we are likely to have a photo. We also have a significant library and library of books, and that library we believe now to have well over 90% a copy of the books that have been written on Scottish Railways or relate to Scottish Railways. Costs, well, everything is financed either by grants or by collections or by various other means that I'll show you in a minute. But this care and restoration aspect is critical. Restoring a steam locomotive is not a case of ordering a part and waiting for somebody to deliver it to us. These parts mostly have to be made. We have to maintain locomotives that are in steam, if they're steam locomotives, and we have to maintain also locomotives that will never be in steam again because they are probably beyond restoration. Fundraising, we do rail tours. Typically over the summer, every couple of weeks, we would have run a rail tour from somewhere, often from Bo'ness. Some of them start from Linlithgow, some start from Glasgow, odd stations here or there. They go all over Scotland and indeed occasionally go down into England. There's a Christmas one goes down to the Christmas market at Lincoln most years. Big problems at the moment because what you're looking at there is an old locomotive and very old coaches. These are from 1950s, 1960s style coaches. For the purists, they're Mark I coaches. These have drop toilets. They don't have tanks, so they drop what comes into the toilet straight out onto the tracks. From this year, that is an illegal thing to do, and we therefore have a big issue about changing these coaches to put in retention toilets, as we call them. They're also supposed to have automatic doors, and that, of course, is completely inconsistent with preservation. Pardon me. So the purists would say we can't change them, we can't upgrade them to modern standards, and Network Rail would say you're not taking them on our tracks unless you upgrade them. So that's a big debate that's going on at the moment. Also fundraising, we run Thomas the Tank Engine Days. There's a franchise that owns the Thomas the Tank Engine concept, and we basically have use of that franchise under strictly controlled basis. Make a huge amount of money. We sell every seat on every train until COVID, in which case we have to consider whether we can run Thomas the Tank Engine trains with social distancing. I personally believe it could not be made financially effective. So we'll just have to see how that evolves. We also run Santa specials, as you may know, and again, I can't see how that could be made financially acceptable with social distancing. And I can't see us by Christmas this year being able to run Santa trains in the way we know them. Huge amounts of involvement. I mean, the people that you see on a Santa day or on a Thomas day are all volunteers, and the money that's taken in pays the costs of the day and also provides a large amount of our running cost. There are Gala Days. This is a diesel gala. We have steam galas. Again, income from that. Regular visitors, of course, is one of our main aspects. The people who come along, perhaps for afternoon teas. We now have afternoon teas until COVID. We had afternoon teas on our 2 o'clock train most days, and these can be pre-booked and are extremely popular. They make us a significant amount of income. That's the story of the railway up until today.